afterwards for people who can. So anyway, hopefully that doesn't trouble you too much, but now that you know, you can either be more circumspect or less. Hi, Brad. So welcome to Think Again. Delighted that so many have shown up. Doesn't surprise me. David Ostler is, I think, well-known. You're a well-known celebrity now. Now, what happened to Rochelle there? Where'd she go? There is she. She's off screen. Okay. So Rochelle is the ref, apparently, but we're happy to look at you too. So if you want to share, that's fine. Thank you to Jana for rushing in to get your little hotel room in California and be able to join us and host us. Appreciate that very much. Hope you guys have had a good first week or so of your new year, despite crazy COVID numbers. Hope we're all trying to do our part to be safe and help things move along here. And this topic tonight is really dear to my heart. For several years, I've been in the dialogue community. I was more actively involved with it, kind of like Ross Collier was too. He was one of my dialogue partners in crime that we worked with some other people. And I've worked a little bit with Carolyn Clark. She's up at the University of Utah and works in mediation. And anyway, this is such an important thing to learn how to discuss difficult topics with people of difference. And I'm still a long ways from getting to where I want to be. One of the resources that David gave me was this book, How to Have Difficult Conversations, which I had not read before. I'm going to listen to it again, probably 2 more times. There's things that I caught that I don't do well, and a number of things that ideas that I thought would be useful. And so I'm excited down the road to try to apply those things. I encourage you to check that book out. And then the other one, Think Again, which is kind of fun because it's the same name as this group. It's been around a long time. Now I'm spacing on his name. What's his name, David?
Adam Grant.
Where'd David go? We lose
He
him.
was muted. It's Adam Grant.
Yeah, there you are. Adam Grant. Yeah. He was fun. I was listening to some more podcasts by him. One really fun one you could look up is where he interviews Malcolm Gladwell, and they kind of, I mean, not in a painful way or a harsh way, kind of push back on each other's ideas and thoughts, and it's really fun. But anyway, it was just really nice to dive into some of those resources. And then, of course, if you haven't read Bridges, that book that David wrote several years ago, that's more specifically about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and people having doubts and how leaders perceive those who have doubts and how parents and family members often perceive those who have doubts with their faith. That is a really groundbreaking, important book too. And I love how David is just bridging his prior work into a larger sphere because he senses, the country's got some problems in being able to talk to each other and come to some understanding and resolutions even at times with each other. And he sees that within the Latter-day Saint faith. This is bigger than that. He's adopted a kind of a national, international type program, 3 Circles. And frankly, he's investing a lot of his personal money and time into this and not going to get anything out of it. It's just because he feels so strongly about people trying to build bridges across these differences, because it really is tearing families and churches and communities and countries apart. So very grateful that David's doing this work and that he's going to share, he and Rochelle tonight, their time with us. So I'm going to turn, so if you don't know much about David, of course, as always, go to the website and you'll have a bio there. And again, those things will be posted that he suggested we read. And I'd still encourage you, if you haven't looked at those yet, to go ahead and look at them and avail yourself of them. And I think that's kind of all we need to do as introduction. There's a few things I'll mention at the end. Hopefully I'll remember. There's a documentary that I want to share with you that I shared in the email. It was really good. Jen and I both saw that. Pretty impressive. But I was just going to turn the time over to David and take it away. And then if everybody would mute, sorry, David, if everybody will mute, and then we can unmute when you have something to say, but that'll make it nice and quiet and peaceful for David. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. I'm just going to take a few minutes and kind of describe my journey, and then I'm going to get us involved in an active exercise. And for that active exercise, I'd like to kind of prime you to think about this question: why can't we talk to each other? Why can't we talk to each other? And when we get to that active part, I'll invite some of you to share your thoughts about that. And we'll do that in a structured way that I think is a powerful way to deal with listening, difference, understanding, curiosity. And I'll go into that a little bit as we go through this introduction. I will tell you, Jay mentioned my book, Bridges. The first kind of group I went and talked to Bridges was this group. At least I think it was this group, wasn't it? It was a derivative, or but it was really meaningful to me. And I remember someone asked me a question. They may be on the call tonight, but I'll tell you, it messed with my mind. It said, it was actually a statement, not a question, but it was, Dave, listening is subversive. And I said, why is listening subversive? And he said, because if we listen, we actually change. So that one has been with me long enough, and I've said it enough around the house that I have shopping bags made with listening is subversive, because it was meaningful to me, and I just want to always be able to think about that. And it's not because I want to subvert, it's because as I have listened, I have changed. And almost always that change has been expansive, but almost all of the change that has been expansive for me has originated in some sort of exercise of listening. And when I wrote Bridges, to me, that was the most powerful message that came through, not just because of the comment in this group, but because as I learned stories, I learned things. As I heard people speak, many of them who had never spoken about these issues to other people outside their close family, and no one had ever asked them, as I heard those stories, it changed me. And the change has continued. It's not just about listening to religious stories or stories of people who have conflict with religion or membership in the church or values or whatever. It's the conflict that exists in all of us in all of our settings, whether it's political, whether it's the view that we have towards our community, how we relate to people inside our faith, outside of our faith, or even how we relate to each other in none of those areas. The LDS apostle, Elder Renlund, at his last general conference talked about the importance of reducing contention. He sees it in society. It was a good speech, a good talk, but he didn't provide any framework for how to do that. He didn't say, here are 5 skills that you need to do in order to be able to reduce contention. As I have reflected on contention in my life, I have kind of found myself doing really one of 2 things. I either retreat to my own kind of safe space, my own bubble, if you will, people who think like me, media that I read and feel good about, people that say things that confirm kind of what I believe. Or I try and fix things and try and change the other person's view. And that almost inevitably leads, for me at least, to be angry and to say, you know, how can you believe that? It's so clear to me, you know, and I get angry, I get frustrated, and then I inevitably kind of regret that path I go down. And then I start to retreat again into my own bubble. And I wanted to kind of find patterns in my own life that I could adopt that would help me kind of deal with that. And the primary skill that I need to develop, and I think many of us need to develop, is how to listen. And I don't think we're taught that in most places. We're not taught that necessarily in our families. We're not taught that in kind of the political worlds in which we either find ourselves deeply immersed or running away from. And we don't find that, at least I haven't found that in kind of religious settings that I have been in. Some people kind of demand moral authority to demand acceptance and use kind of affirmations of personal belief to try and get other people to believe. Some manipulate, some ignore, some rebut, but very few people kind of pause and say, I'd be curious to know why you think that. I'd be curious to know how you came to that conclusion. And I think that kind of skill seems so simple, but it can be quite profound. So in my efforts to kind of figure this out, I came across a group. They're a group called Three Practices, and it's founded by Jim Henderson and Jim Hancock. And they, over the last, I don't know, maybe 10 years, have been having these kinds of dialogues. And they have developed kind of a structure that seems quite simple, but in that simplicity, they can have dialogue around complex issues with respect while they teach the skills of listening and curiosity. And I just want to show a video. It's a 3-minute video that illustrates how they do that. They call these circles. And these circles that you're going to see are 3 years old. So that's why everyone's there in person without masks. But they've since taken these circles and put them on Zoom so that they can kind of continue this work. So here we go, if I can do this.
Salt is a great idea. Salt shakers are a better idea. Ideas are great. Distribution of ideas is better. What if we could distribute attention? What if we could distribute listening? What if we could distribute understanding? This is not an easy problem to solve. That's why we joke and say, are you going to Thanksgiving? Because you know you have to go in and pretend to be someone. It's a lot of work. It's easier to yell. What if you didn't have to do that? What if there's another way? This group was born out of curiosity about people that were good at crossing the difference divide, rather than just getting mad and yelling and doing kind of all the standard things that we all do. And we justify our behavior because we talk to our friends and they think we're right, you know? And so we basically broke this down to 3 practices. People that are good at crossing the difference divide have become unusually interested in others. They've learned the practice of out-listening people. Practice 2 is you practice staying in the room with difference. So in this group tonight, our people have passionate disagreements. And most people don't believe that's possible to do this and not be yelling at each other, but we're not going to yell at each other. The third thing is I stopped comparing my best with your worst. And this was very challenging because we're always tempted to point out the shifting and evading and hope they don't spot ours. So instead of playing gotcha, we let them go ahead and see what happens then. Think of this as a basketball game. There's specific dimensions of the court. The clock is ticking. There's a referee. So people will get 2 minutes of uninterrupted non-judgmental listening. And then anybody in the group can ask a clarifying question. Here's what a clarifying question does not sound like. Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that. They're going to think it, of course, right? This is what we do. But we're not going to show it because we know how to behave like adults. A clarifying question leans into like, please tell me more about this thing that I so passionately disagree with you about. Please say more to me about that. And then people will get 60 seconds to answer it. And then when we're done, we go on to someone else. It turns out that the most difficult part of this entire exercise is learning how to ask a clarifying question. And sometimes the group will help each other do this because there's another thing we're doing here. And that while we disagree about facts and information and beliefs or whatever it is, we are all trying to become more understanding. In fact, I would argue you cannot actually learn how to understand unless you're doing it with somebody that you passionately disagree with, because you're simply not going to be pushed. That's the spirit of what we're learning together.
So that was Jim Henderson, and Jim has now run this drill, meaning running circles, hundreds of times. And they've done amazing circles in different topics, ranging from vaccinations to critical race theory, to religious belief, to pastoral aspects of loss, and the like. And so last summer, Rochelle and I went through training so that we could be what's called referees to run 3 practice circles. And I kind of have branded some of this under the Bridges title. We have been doing Bridges 3 practice circles since we graduated from that course last August. And now we have 4 more referees that have gone through training. And now and they completed their training in November. And we have another 8 referees that are in training right now. And the intent is to take 3 practice circles wherever people in kind of the broader LDS community would like to take them, and to have these discussions. Because if people have these discussions, they retain the skills associated with the methodology and the approach. Let me just give you some examples of some of the circles that we have run to date. I promise I retired from PowerPoint, but you get 5 slides. This first slide, I think, is just really powerful. It also has 2 quotes at the beginning. Being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. That's a Bridges quote. It's a powerful quote that talks about how listening is healing in and of itself. So these are the exact examples of circles that we have already held in this broader kind of Bridges LDS community and 3 practices. So we've done them around belief. I knew I needed to reimagine my faith when, what I'm not saying at church, how much do I have to believe to belong? How can I create more belonging in my ward? Here is how my ward manages COVID. And this one isn't about LDS faith. Here is what I thought about the book Jesus and John Wayne. And in our community, what if women were in charge of everything? This is what I think about abortion. This is what COVID has cost me. Why is everyone so mad? This is what I realized that patriotism means different things to different people. And then about ourselves. Are you okay? What have you lost? A light bulb moment for me in preserving my relationship with my child was ... I will tell you, one of the tenderest circles I did was with a referee who's on the call tonight. Her name's Candace. And Candace organized on Thanksgiving Day a circle for divorced people that were experiencing loss associated with the holiday. And we did a small circle with just a few people. I think that everyone had tears, but everyone listened. And one woman at the very end said, "No one has ever asked me if I'm okay." So to me, that was pretty powerful. So tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to try a circle. And we're not going to try a circle, we're going to do a circle. And the topic we're going to do is, why can't we talk to each other? Now, Rochelle and I are going to slip into our referee hats. I'm the co-referee and Rochelle is the referee, and we have a script that we use in all of our circles. So I'm going to go through that with you and you'll learn how this operates. And then we'll jump right in and we'll ask very quickly for someone to respond to the question, why can't we talk to each other? Welcome, everyone. Let's get started. I'm the co-referee and I'm Dave. Tonight, I want you to remind you of the 3 practices, which are, I'll be unusually interested in others. I'll stay in the room with difference. I'll stop comparing my best with your worst. 3 practice circles help us gain clarity about what others think and feel. They also teach us how to be curious and to learn how to listen and ask meaningful questions. This isn't a discussion, a debate, or a dialogue group. It's a workout that prepares us to see and hear things we might otherwise miss. You can relax. No one will call on you. We won't go around the circle or take polls. You decide if and when you want to talk. And it's okay to turn off your video and slip out if you need to. If you do take 2 minutes to share, no one will interrupt you, because we're here to practice listening with genuine curiosity about what people really think and really want. Feel free to jot down notes to help you remember a question or something you want to say later. After the circle, everyone will have an opportunity to say any sort of thank yous that they would like to people who either asked a very curious question or had them thinking a response that they thought was particularly insightful. So you may want to jot down notes as you think about that. Our head referee will review the rules and explain them as we go. And our head referee tonight is Rochelle, who has been reffing me for 42 years.
Good evening, everyone. Our framing question tonight is, why can't we talk to each other? A volunteer will respond to the framing question for up to 2 minutes. Following that, anyone may ask a clarifying question. The most important rule is that each clarifying question must begin with the phrase, "I'd be curious to know." So just for practice, please, everybody unmute yourself. I'll wait a minute while I see your microphones unmute. And on the count of 3, everyone will say with me, "I'd be curious to know." So I see a few more mutes still on there, everybody. It helps to try it out once. All right, that's looking good. 1, 2, 3. I'd
be curious to know.
Again, every clarifying question begins with that. Thank you. You can mute up again. The primary skill we'll practice in this circle is learning to ask questions that are genuinely curious and get to the point in as few of words as possible. A big part of my job is helping you to work on that skill. So I may lend you a hand if you have trouble finding your question. Following each clarifying question, the volunteer who responded to the framing question will have 1 minute to respond to the clarifying question. The person asking the clarifying question may then ask one follow-up question if they would like. And again, the respondent has 1 minute to respond. You can tell I'm the head because I have this nifty clock and okay, everyone can see my clock. So I'll be holding that up, showing you if you have 2 minutes responding to the framing question or 1 minute responding to a clarifying question. Please don't be surprised if there are periods of silence. We can all sit in silence while we wait for people to find their voice or their question. When you are ready to ask a question, please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And as I call on people, I'll be using the names I can see on your screens. So I will say whatever you have up there. And one more thing, when I say thank you while you're talking, what I really mean is please stop talking. So let me repeat that. When I say thank you, what I really mean is please stop. So it's time to get started. Who would like to be the first person to respond to our framing question? Why can't we talk to each other?
Are you on? Can't hear you. Annie, did you want to? Is that? Okay, guess not. So where do we find the raise
Is
hand?
that John? So the at the bottom of your screen, there is a little icon probably towards the right that says reactions.
Okay,
And if you click on reactions, there'll be a raise hand. And when you press that, then a little hand shows up in your screen. I believe I saw John Ogden's hand physically go up. John, would you like to respond to our question? Why can't we talk to each other?
Sure, I can share a few ideas.
Thank you.
I think there are a few things in our cultural setup that are affecting our ability to talk to each other. One is a lot of influence from sporting events where there's a winner and a loser. And I just noticed that a lot of news organizations kind of use the same setup as this, as you watch the news and a sporting event are often set up very similarly, where it's head to head. Again, a winner and a loser. Also hyper sensationalized, quick back and forth takes, cut to commercial breaks. And so there's not a lot of time to get a lot of insights out. And then that kind of ripples through to other areas. And the way that we talk to each other is kind of set up similarly, where in social media, it's kind of like a winner and a loser, where if you can find the right crowd and say the right thing to the crowd, you can score points by getting more likes from the people who agree with you. And the outrage generates higher engagement, and that's what the social media companies want. That's the algorithm likes that a lot. And it's not the only way to do it, but it does incentivize that kind of activity. And so I think that there are just a few things that are underlying, I may even call them all algorithms, underlying our cultural institutions at the moment that kind of feed the outrage and the winner and loser mentality.
Great. John, thank you for getting us started. Is there somebody that has a clarifying question for John? Again, you can use your raised hand at the bottom. Oh, there it is. Trevor, I see your screen lit up. Okay. And remember to begin, please, with the phrase, I'd be curious to know.
Hi, this is Barclay and this is Trevor.
Okay.
John, I'd be curious to know how this impacts you in your family relationships.
Probably most strikingly with my relationship with my dad, who I disagree with often politically and increasingly disagree with. And we can often get along well in person, but whenever we have an email exchange, and despite my best intentions, I go to a logic-oriented place and a debate-oriented place, and I just had to say I can't do that format with my dad. But we can have a conversation face to face. So that's probably how it influences my life, at least one of the ways that it influences my life, or it shows up in my life rather.
Barclay, do you have a follow-up question?
I'm good, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, Dean McGovern.
Thank you. Thanks, John. I would be curious to know your background with sports and media.
It's a good question. Yeah, that's fun to think about because my dad really loves sports. I don't care for them. And so maybe there is like some conscious thing going on there in terms of my personal dislike of sports. I'm just a consumer of both. In moments, like I'll just observe. I don't watch news media on TV or sports often, but I'll just observe what's happening when I do see them. So a loose spectator, I guess, is how I would say is my relationship to both.
Dean, do you have a follow-up question?
I do not. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Off to a good start. Ross, do you have a clarifying question? Beginning with the words, I'd be curious to know.
Yes, thank you. I'd be curious to know, John, how you see your goal or goals and your father's goal or goals in these conversations that you referred to.
When we're both at our worst, I think our goal is to win and to prove the other wrong. I think at our best, our goal is to find solutions that alleviate suffering for the most people. And yeah, maybe I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Ross, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. I'd be curious to know, but feel free not to answer. How have these conversations affected your view or affection for your father?
The email exchanges that we're having back and forth were really corrosive to our relationship. They reduced us. They kept reducing my view of him to this one quality of him. And so he was no longer human. It was almost like interacting with an artificial intelligence, back and forth, typing back and forth. And it was really dehumanizing. That's kind of where I caught it and said, hey, let's not do this anymore. But when we talk face to face, and I'm able to see who he is more fully. And even better, when we can talk face to face and not just talk about politics, but talk about a range of things, I get a sense for the full human that he is.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Candace, would you like to ask a clarifying question?
I would, thanks. I would be curious to know if another metaphor or model comes to mind that you would recommend in place of the athletic competition.
Yeah, I personally really love the model of Wikipedia, even though it's not perfect. I think the algorithm that is behind Wikipedia, where everybody can contribute and they're trying to get closer and closer to the truth, ideally, that it's not, again, not a perfect model, I think is a more democratic and a model where everybody tries to win together rather than play this gotcha outrage inducing game. So I would really love to see, I honestly think a lot of it has to do with our advertising models within news media and within social media. The advertising models want outrage, and Wikipedia, where it's a nonprofit, everybody donates to it, I think is a much better foundational algorithm for getting along.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question, Candace?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know if you have any other ideas about what might move us in that direction. You mentioned a couple of things, but maybe just say a little bit more if you have any thoughts.
I think it's a tough thing to navigate because you're dealing with financial incentives at these corporations. And so you have to, I could be wrong about this, but I think you have to change the economic models to get better conversations. When we're dealing with these economic models that promote winners and losers for fun and for entertainment, I think that along with the advertisements, I think that you run into problems with getting along. So I think you have to change the underlying models to really get to a healthier place.
Right, okay. So we've got, hands popping up all over now. We'll go through these and then open it up to somebody else to respond to our lead question. So Jameis, someone in your square had raised their hand.
Oh, yes. I'd be curious to know, John, a little bit more about your father's positions. Does he subscribe to some of the not conspiracy theories, but some of the sort of notions that are propagated, on conservative talk shows or television? And also, does he often perceive an enemy in the opposition somehow?
Yeah. Yes, to both. Yeah. So it's kind of starting out right from the beginning, like anybody who disagrees with me is an enemy. It's how I perceive it.
Jameis, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, and by enemy, I'd be curious to know if by enemy, not merely the people who disagree with him, but does a lot of times these positions are taken harshly because they perceive somehow, I'll use an example, say a
So
Democrat.
Jameis, I'm going to use you for an example. Sorry, it
Oh.
looks like you can take it. So on these questions, you want to be tight with, I'd be curious to know, and then in just a few words, what is it you're asking? And then John will respond.
Okay, let me try that again.
Thank
I'd
you.
be curious to know if by enemy, he views, say, groups like, say, the Democratic Party or similar groups as an enemy with bad motives.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. And okay. Let's open it up now. John, thank you again for leading us out. Appreciate that, and everyone on questions and remembering. I would be curious to know, would somebody else like to respond to our framing question? Why can't we talk to each other? Jameis, your hand is still up. Is that from the question, or would you like to respond?
Yeah.
No, thanks. That's
Okay.
I put my hand up.
Oh, sorry.
I
You,
will.
did you want to say something?
No,
Dan and/or Annie, would you like to respond to why can't we talk to each other? And you are on mute still, so just a moment. Catch your breath. All right.
Yeah, since we're both on camera, can we both respond? Is that allowable?
Absolutely, but you still only get 2 minutes.
Okay, no, that's fine. So the question is, why can't we talk with one another? I think that it comes from experiences that we've had. Sometimes we put out feelers, but sometimes we've been taken unaware by sharing a view, for instance, and being attacked. And so we suddenly feel like, oh, we can't share that view. And You know, that, and it's hard to talk to that person because of that. The other thing that I think is most prevalent right now is that we all have very different information sources from where we get our beliefs and what we want to believe, and we're unwilling to look at the other's information sources because we think they're unreliable and untruthful. I think that's a problem that's plaguing our society right now. And I'll give you your 40 seconds back.
So, Annie, did you want to pop in on that 40 or you want to wait? Okay.
With what he said.
All right, great.
I can give some specific examples if that would be helpful. I don't know.
Sure.
Okay, so I have a son-in-law who's a highway patrol officer, and I was a supporter of gun control, thinking that he would be also, and suddenly I found out that he was very much against gun control. And I also have a sister and her husband who think the election was stolen, and they try to produce evidence that I can't find a credible source for that supports their views.
Thank you. All right. Do we have a follow-up question for Dan? Dean.
Thank you. Dan, I'd be curious to know how it made you feel when you found out that your assumption about your law enforcement relative, I think you said brother-in-law, did not hold the view that you thought he did.
No, how did it make me feel? Well, because he was hostile, I felt hostile. I also realized that this hostility was going to affect our relationship. And it could be more than just my relationship with him. It could be my relationship with his daughter and my grandkids. And so, I don't know, since that happened 2 years ago, I've walked on some pins and needles, and we don't discuss things. We're able to have good conversations on superfluous topics.
Dean, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, so that incident, that topic has kind of fundamentally changed. Are you saying that it fundamentally changed your relationship?
I think that it did, because I thought that we thought alike, and that, you know, that it was a given that he would be for gun control, being a police officer with his life at risk on a, you know, a daily basis even. And then to find otherwise, you know, was surprising. And truth be said, neither of us have explored each other's position in any depth because of that initial friction. It was more than friction and antagonism, hostility.
Thank you. Does somebody else have a clarifying question? Jenny, your hand had been up.
Sorry, I was curious to know if it would be possible to say, or to understand his perspective. Would that be something that
So Jenny, start again. So you'd be curious to know
how he thinks he would respond, the brother-in-law or son-in-law, whatever it is, to a query about, I'm really curious. Tell me why, you don't think gun control is a good idea.
Good job.
Yeah, I think that it would be good for me to ask those kinds of questions. Frankly, I'm a bit timid. We have explored this a little bit. And it's something like, we usually are in family settings when we have conversations, and I don't want that kind of conversation to wreck the celebratory mood of the birthday party or the Christmas or the Thanksgiving occasion that we're at. But yeah, it needs to be explored, and I feel timid about doing that. And the way that you're saying that is exactly what I should do when the topic comes up again.
I noticed she threw in, you could ask, I'd be curious to know of him. Way to go, Jenny. Jenny, do you have a follow-up question?
I think that
starting with, I'd be curious to know.
I'd be curious to know if there are ever side conversations at these family gatherings, where somebody, a couple people find a way to talk about things that they're interested in together, but not necessarily with the whole public group.
Yeah, that's insightful. I have those conversations with another daughter who I've filled out the situation, and she has views that more parallel my own. And I haven't with my daughter who's married to the UHP officer, somewhat because I think she probably shares his perspective, but two, she's in kind of a vulnerable state at this point. And so, we don't, I don't really want to go there with her.
Thank you. Alfonso, do you have a clarifying question?
Yes, I'd be curious to know, Dan, how important it is for you to know that people agree with you on this point. Like, how big of a deal is it for you? I'd be curious to know.
It depends. I mean, I would like family to, and a lot of my family do agree with me on this point. And I have some friends that we talk about, say, gun control. It's not a top issue on my mind right now, but whenever we have another mass shooting, it certainly surfaces, and I get a little upset about why the country can't take to what, in my own mind, seems very logical steps to control guns like they do automobiles. But yeah, I think I seek out people that think like me, and those are the ones that I talk with about this topic.
Thank you. Alfonso, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I actually do. Dan, I'd be curious to know whether you now feel like you would much rather avoid asking people about their view on this particular topic.
Yeah, I do, particularly if it looks like they have weapons and carry arms and are extreme patriots. I don't want to kind of get in their way.
Thank you. All right, given the time, how about if we open it up for one other person to respond to our framing question, particularly if we've got a woman out there who would like to voice her thoughts, that would be balancing, and we'd appreciate that. And we could take a couple clarifying questions and then continue with the evening. So Anybody else like to be our final person to respond? Jennifer Baxter. Oh, okay. I'm going to go with Jennifer. Sorry, I didn't see everything. Jennifer. And take off your mute.
Okay, yeah, I just realized I was not on mute.
Great.
I'd be curious to know if other people are like
we were going to invite you to respond to why can't we talk to each other?
Oh,
Would you like to do that?
Yeah, sorry, that I forgot what I was supposed to start
So
with.
you don't have to be curious. You get to just give us what's in your head and
Okay,
let
I'm
us
gonna
be
say
curious.
that I think a lot of why I don't talk to people is I'm afraid that what they say might rock my own comfort zone. So I sense a lot of fear in the people around me when there is a disagreement, that whatever we disagree on is going to destroy a relationship. It's going to tear apart a family. It's going to make things difficult. And so out of that fear, we often keep quiet, and then we build up a story in our heads that is not necessarily true. And for me, it's caused more distance and more discomfort to not talk to each other. So I tend to be a pusher. I want to talk about it, but I know that there's a lot of fear for me associated with talking about things that are difficult, that are different than my perspective, that might challenge what I've always felt as my comfort zone of what I believe. So I'd be curious to know if other people feel that same fear.
All right. So if you would like to participate in the circle tonight, we're going to take a couple clarifying questions here. So is there anyone who has not participated yet that has a clarifying question for Jennifer? So it looks like Bob, you're on under Gloria's name.
I would be curious to know what would happen if in those situations you simply said, "Can you tell me more?"
I would say usually when I've tried that, it leads to better understanding. It's taking that leap of trusting that they're not going to attack me.
Bob, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. What would happen if I would be curious to know if you would feel comfortable saying, would you be interested in hearing my point of view on this?
Yes, that is, I think not having the right phrases has made it more difficult to bridge those gaps. Not having the right, I'm afraid I'm not going to say it correctly. I'm afraid it's going to come across the wrong way. So sometimes out of fear, I just don't say anything because I'm afraid of what the response, like that they won't take it as curiosity, that they'll take it as that I'm challenging them. Maybe that's what I'm fearing.
Thank you. And one more qualifying question.
Parents.
Jameis.
Yeah.
Are you on mute?
Oh, oh yeah.
Tell them who you are.
I'm Karen, and I would be curious to know more about your feelings about the relationship with these people that you want to talk with, but
can't, it seems like there's a longing to have this conversation. And I would be curious to know more about that.
I think my attempts to be curious before came across as I was trying to be nosy and know about things that they weren't comfortable about me knowing. So I guess maybe that's where my fear comes from, is that in the past, when I have tried to be curious and try to know what's going on with them, it's been received as, you're going to tell somebody else of the way I feel. You're not going to like me if I tell you how I feel. So sometimes my curiosity is responded to by fear. So I feel like maybe there's not that safety there.
Karen, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I really am curious about the longing, because it seems like there's a longing to have that conversation. And so I was wondering if you could tell us more about how if you've ever thought about conveying the longing to have the relationship, the conversation, support the relationship.
So this is a brother that has estranged himself from our family for the last probably 20 years since the death of my mom. So I know that there's a lot of tender feelings, and a reticence to discuss that. So I feel like if I bring it up, I'm pushing him into an area that he doesn't want to go yet, because he hasn't brought it.
Thank you, Jennifer. Again, I'm looking at the clock, so I'm going to thank each of you for listening, for participating, for sharing, for giving great insights, and I'll turn the time over to David.
So when we run these circles, at the very end, we do what we call thank yous. And the three practice people feel like the event up until now has allowed a lot of difference to occur, and to do it in a good way. But the thank yous they want to do as a way of knitting people together at the end. So I'm going to read the thank you script, and we'll go through thank yous for 3 or 5 minutes, however long it is natural. And then at the end, I'll offer a few more points about what we're doing with circles, and then answer any questions that you folks have of me about this topic. And then we could have maybe a broader discussion. So the thank you script goes this way. We end our circles with thank yous to people who made us think, or encouraged us by something they said or the way they said it, especially if they demonstrated unusual curiosity or staying in the room with difference, or resisting the impulse to compare their best with other people's worst. If you would like to thank someone, go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand if you prefer, and offer thank yous. I'm going to just do a couple of thank yous. I really liked, I was really deeply thinking about Candace's question about whether there's different models that we can operate under. Appreciate Jennifer's tenderness talking about, talking about a family situation as opposed to political situation. I really appreciated Alfonso's question of how important is agreement, and I think he was saying versus relationship. Someone said, we just don't discuss things. I can't remember who said that, but I wanted to thank you for that. So who else would like to thank people, preferably by name, but in general is fine.
I would.
I'd like to thank John Ogden for sharing about his relationship with his father, and in particular, sharing about when they're in person, that it's easier for him to stay in the room with difference and that they get along than it is through either email or text. I can't remember, but I appreciated that because sometimes that's hard for me to stay in the room with difference in person.
Who else? Scott, or
Helen.
the other person.
I'm Helen. I'd like to thank Jennifer for her comment about, in response to the question about the question, asking the question, tell me more. And why that can be a difficult question because it might invite a response that's hard to hear. And I could relate to that. So thanks for that, Jennifer.
Thank you. Dan or Annie? You're muted.
You're muted.
I wanted to thank the two of you for having this experience, because one thing I realize is that sometimes I think through things by speaking it through. And so sharing an experience and then getting everyone's feedback kind of about that experience and getting to me to explain why I think or why I feel the way I do has been helpful. And I think there are takeaways there that maybe I can broach that conversation again with my son-in-law.
Others?
Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone who actually asked the questions, stated their position so that we could ask them questions because they were vulnerable. And as we progressed with the questions, they answered them honestly. And it was, well, that vulnerability was helpful to me. I understood more deeply the problems involved and maybe ways forward. But yeah, thank you for being so open and honest.
Alfonso?
Yes, I agree with James. I felt good about how some of the individuals were open and willing to share, because you cannot listen if someone is not willing to share. So I'm grateful for them and their vulnerability during that time to share.
Thank you. Marlene?
I wanted to thank Jennifer for sharing that story. It's interesting to me how it maps onto a lot of my relationships too. So appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, with that, the circle's officially over. So you've experienced one. We've had about 400 people participate in various circles. And I'm going to put in the chat a web address so you can see 3 practice circles, what's coming up for their circles, and then also some of the Bridges circles. And I'm going to just share my screen and also just go through some of the circles that we have planned, because I think they'll kind of give you an idea of the way in which we are approaching this. Here's one way I've changed after my loved one's faith crisis. As a queer child of God, my relationship with Christ and the church has been, why is everyone so mad? What have you lost? This is for a group of young mothers. Are you okay? For parents whose children have left the church. And how do we minister to those who question? That's a presentation circle that I will be doing on my book for LDS members in the UK. We have done these sponsorings. We've posted in kind of a sponsored way from different groups. The groups have allowed us to post, and we've been using topics that we know that they're interested in. our approach is to be able to pull people into these circles, have them learn these skills, and at their next Thanksgiving dinner, say, I'd be curious to know with just about everyone that they talk to, or in their ward, or in with their friends across the globe or even next door. So we've done it in these different groups. Some of them are groups that kind of naturally affiliate with some of the themes and bridges, and others of them are for groups where we have referees with specific interests. And so we kind of let the referees decide where they have connections and relationships and try and bring these kind of techniques back in. And then lastly, just go back to that quote, being heard is so close to being loved that for the average person, they are almost indistinguishable. Two other things I'll tell you. I have been doing more listening. I'm actually going to update my book in February with a chapter about mixed faith families. It's something I didn't listen to when I wrote the initial book, and the challenges of parents whose children leave, or a spouse whose other spouse has different beliefs. These are kind of complex issues. And so I've been listening. I've listened to about 50 stories there. And they're powerful, and I'll summarize those and make that available both in a new edition and also as a free downloadable. And the other thing that I've done is I've created a leadership guide for my book that is essentially just questions, and I think they're curious questions that leaders could ask in their council meetings or presidency meetings that get to the issues associated with why some people feel they either don't belong or need to leave the church. And that can be downloaded off the bridgeslds.com website. Down at the bottom, there's a download button if you want to click that. So I believe questions and I believe listening really matters. I'm going to take questions for about 10 minutes. Phrase them, I'd be curious to know. Rochelle will time me so that I won't drone on, and that we can get to as many questions as you guys would like. And if you don't, then we can go to an after party and just kind of talk. So I'll open it up and let you guys kind of control the floor.
I'm curious how you would answer the prompt.
Yeah.
You get 1 minute or two.
I get 1 minute on
Okay.
this.
Go.
I don't know. I think it's, there's a lot about how we're socialized into culture. Some of that is in the church, we have strong truth claims, which means that the other person must be wrong. And because I can go to the temple and have a temple recommend, it means that people who believe differently than me are bad and are wrong. And I think it happens like you described in social media, and business models are about outrage, like you said. I also just think we're just not very good at it. It's, I'm a runner, and I started running when I was 49 and I was fat. And that first half mile was so painful, but I've gotten better at it. So I think it's skills we have to learn. So that's my time.
David, thank you very much for this really wonderful instruction. I'd be curious to know whether you get any requests for leading circles, say at 47 East South Temple.
All the time.
Yeah, I'm so busy with those circles, Bob. It's amazing that I was able to, fit in tonight. So no, I haven't, and I would love, if I could have a wish for my birthday or for my funeral or some great event, it would be to have a wonderful general conference talk on how to listen. Not that, no one's opposed to that. it's such a subtle skill that is so impactful that I've forgotten about it for 60 years of my life. And so now I've newly discovered it, and it's like a new language for me, and it's beautiful. And so I think we simply neglect this skill, and we learn how to testify and we learn how to proclaim. But I think we can listen too. So, and they don't compete. They're good.
One of the things that you could suggest to some of the people is that we get another song for primary, which is listen to the still small voice of the person next to you, or listen to teach. No, I'm serious, that to have a song about listening for children that would go with the idea that we're instructed to listen to the still small voice, but we're not really taught how to listen to one another.
Yeah. Katie.
Hi, I'd just like to give a brief thanks as well for having me and allowing me to witness this. I'd be curious to know how you encourage participation from both sides of an issue in both a circle, and how we can encourage participation transferring these skills to our lives.
That's a really great question, Katie. It's one that Jay and I have talked about a lot. Sometimes it's easier to recruit people from particular sides of the divide. I think the key is to find topics that people are interested in and let them talk about them because they want to talk about them. So I'm openly looking for partners that think completely differently than I do, and have them take the ball with us. I'll train them. I'll fund a large portion of their training with 3 practices. And then they can go to the communities that they want to and that they're connected with. And then through websites and future circles, they may have an interest in joining in to something that's a little bit more controversial. But that's a great question, and I don't have the answer for that. Alfonso.
Brother David, I'd be curious to know what set you on this course to have people build bridges instead of dividing. Was there an experience that you had? Was it a build-up? I'd just be curious to know.
It's a really great question. I'm not going to write a book about that, but it's maybe not a 1-minute answer. I just have found that whenever I have listened, I have learned. My whole career was in healthcare, but it was in effectively evidence-based medicine. I'm not a doctor, but we looked at what works. We always challenged our assumptions. We always tried to listen to perspectives that were different than the existing system so that we could find ways to improve it. And that never challenged me kind of emotionally or in terms of conflict. It was the right way to do things, and we built things better. And maybe I've had some life events that have caused me to want to listen to close family friends that think differently, and every time I've learned. Scott, thanks for the question, Alfonso. That was a really good one.
It's Helen again.
Oh, Helen. I'd be curious to know if this method, in addition to like improving listening skills, also improves floor sharing skills. And if you've noticed that people whose views tend to have more airtime, it's more balanced with people whose views have had less airtime. If the two groups, one group learns to share the floor and one group learns to take the floor.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a learning that could be provable. I've loved if someone here is a sociologist and could devote some attention on how we measure those questions. I'm a measure nerd, but I don't have the methods to know how to do it. I'd love to know that. I do know that the way 3 practices were set up, the clock is important. And you shut down long conversations and long preaches that no one knows how to kind of rudely interrupt, because there's a clock that does that and a ref that does that. And so people can't dominate. And I can see I got 19 seconds left and I have to make my point. And if I don't do it succinctly, the buzzer's going to go off and I'm going to feel embarrassed. So I'd love to have elders quorum this way, or a ward council, or other ways where more views can be heard and more questions asked. Thank you. Walter and your iPhone.
Yeah. Hey, Dave, good to see you. Hey, I'd be curious to know, I'm in Syracuse, Missouri, a town of 172 people. And I'm just curious, where are you folks from? Somebody mentioned they're from out of state or something. Are you guys all in Utah or what?
So this, Walter's a friend of mine from years gone back when I didn't know how to listen. So I apologize, Walter, for all the times I didn't listen to you. Most people are from Utah and Salt Lake, and the ThinkAgain-FaithAgain group is a Salt Lake group, but I see people on here that are not just out of country, but also out of state. So I think the great thing about these virtual communities is that we can have these kinds of discussions across broad geographic divides and engage our difference and learn these skills and learn from people. And if we're in small towns and don't have that audience, we can find bigger groups to be able to do that. So Walter, you may benefit from checking out some of those upcoming circles and joining. Thank you. Dan and Annie, Dan or Annie?
Annie, do you have something?
No, well, I just appreciated being able to listen to the whole conversation, because I think I have some new tools to use in conversations.
Right.
I had a question. Oh, go ahead.
I'm done.
Oh, but I had a question. In the church, we're
I'd be curious to know. I'm going to still enforce that.
Okay.
Hey, and Dan, could I just suggest, not everyone is LDS that attends these. There's a number of people who aren't. So if we could speak in a way that is inclusive to people not of our tradition. So maybe it's, you say the Mormon Church or whatever, and then not use, if we could just not use specific terms that people might not understand that are just kind of Mormon terms. Does that make sense? That'll help people who aren't of our faith who are attending of the LDS Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Thank you. Go ahead, Dan.
Shall I go ahead? Okay, I'm trying to listen to you. There's a scripture in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, scripture of the Doctrine and Covenants, that says that we should conduct our meetings by dialogue, by having time for each person to share their thoughts and opinions and allow the Spirit to help us edify one another.
Okay, so Dan,
my question is, how do we take this into our elders quorum, for instance, a meeting of the church or the Relief Society, when often anything that's tangential to the lesson gets shut down, and a lot of people feel uncomfortable in sharing?
So my answer is there's not a magic way to do this. It takes time and it takes a group. So I think you can, so for example, when I'm in church or I'm in some other setting and it's a group, I will often use I'd be curious to know. I use I'd be curious to know in emails. I use I'd be curious to know with my family members. Sometimes I need to be better about it, but you can introduce those ideas and hopefully the seeds grow and the seeds are fruitful. So thanks for that question. I'm going to take two more in interest of time. Trevor or the Trevor Cates box.
I'd be curious to know how this has impacted your marriage, how you do it in marriage.
I don't know. You know, I'd be curious to know that too. She's a better listener than me. This is a skill I'm developing. After Rochelle and I went through training, we were in an Uber going to the airport to fly out to California. And the Uber driver was, we live in, Washington, DC area. So our culture here is we wear masks, we get vaccinated and the like, but not all are like that. And our Uber driver wasn't. And he was convinced that COVID increases were happening because of the southern border and immigrants. And I just kind of lost it and had to tell him how wrong he was. And afterwards, it was like Rochelle said, you could have said, I'd be curious to know. I'm not good at this yet. I'm only up to a mile and I'm still fat, in terms of my running analogy. So I think our marriage is a work in progress. I think these skills are blessing us in our family and our home. And I hope to even get better at it. And I went over a minute and Rochelle didn't kick me in the head. The Jameson M. Johnson box.
Okay, this is Karen, and I'm gonna follow up on what Helen was talking about, turn taking and sharing. And I really appreciated, is it Jane? David, I really appreciated how you tried to balance the contributions between men and women on this call. And then I'm wondering, how do you balance the conversation when people who are important to the conversation are not present? Let's say the quorum of elders or I know that there are ways to do that, but how does your method do that?
So we kind of broke some of the rules tonight. We normally as refs don't moderate. We simply enforce the rules. And the rules are basically whoever wants to participate can participate. And that means that if only men raise their hands, then only men are going to participate. These are kind of tricky and there's interesting dynamics and we're still trying to process this. We had a long thread today in a discussion about women not participating. In most of the circles we've run, the men are the first ones to offer up their 2 minutes. Nothing wrong with that, nothing bad. Is there something we could do that would offer more? So we're still kind of working through some of those issues and trying to structure them in various ways. I'm going to take just a few more minutes and tell you about one of these. And then we're going to take Jenny and then we're going to declare victory. We are running a group, a circle that's predominantly hearing, exclusively hearing queer voices. Because we want to create settings where people's lived experiences that are very different than ours can be heard, and we can ask questions whether we are queer or straight. So one of our circles, we will only have people who self-identify as queer offer up their 2 minutes, and anyone else can respond with a minute or with a clarifying question. But we just want to hear those voices. So we will try and structure settings where we can hear different voices than we traditionally do. We certainly could structure a similar circle for women to speak and anyone could respond. One of our partners, or they're not a partner per se, but one of our trained refs comes from the Leading Saints group. And they are a leadership group that trains people. So we're hopeful that some of these techniques will flow through training in that way. And if there's other people that have other interests in moving this into an area that's more personal to them, we're happy to do that through either hosting circles on their behalf or training referees so that they would do them themselves. So I don't know quite how it gets to all the places in the world. It doesn't, but hopefully it gets to hundreds and thousands of people that after a meeting like this, they'll say, I'd be curious to know. Jenny, and then I'll turn the time to Jay. I'd be curious to know, Jenny.
I'd be curious to know if you looked at other resources, for example, intergroup dialogues that encourage people who talk a lot to provide space for more people to talk who are less likely to jump in.
Good question. And I am not a Jedi master in this. And I've found several other techniques and several other approaches. And I guess my comment would be where we can find things that work, I have an interest in using them. So if there's a specific area outside of 3 practice circles that can accomplish this, and it's kind of within my scope of being able to make happen, I'd like to do that. I have a platform around bridges. It's dear to me. I've learned a lot. I have a passion about it. I don't think I'm done there. And that can take me into helping those kinds of initiatives anywhere. So with that, thanks for letting me be on. Thanks for letting me share something that was important to me. I hope it has been useful to you in some way. I wrote down notes of things that I learned in this, and whenever I'm in this kind of setting, it is that way for me. And so I'm grateful to you. Jay.
Thank you so much, David and Rochelle. What a lovely evening. I've been in a number of these 3 circles, maybe 3 or 4, and they've all been really productive. Some of them very moving at times. So I'm grateful to all of you for being willing to share in this experience and offer your good hearts and your good thoughts. Again, I encourage you to go to the website, to the resources that David recommended, particularly that book, How to Have Difficult Conversations. That is really full of good ideas and ways to manage things. And then I would just encourage all of us to try to keep staying engaged in these. There's, thanks to David, there's no cost unless you want to become someone that actually referees. And then David's and Rochelle are kind enough to offset some of that cost, a good part of that cost. So to become more engaged in this type of constructive listening, I was going to say dialogue, but I think listening is a better word. The barriers are very low, so I would encourage all of us to consider doing that, consider engaging more often in these things and using these principles, even if you don't do the 3 circles, but to try them in your marriage and with your kids and the other people you know. So I'd be curious to know, David, if in this addendum you're doing to your book, particularly with parents who have children and spouses who have left, is there any stories about people, I guess like me, who feel like they've actually benefited and feel fortunate that my children and wife are in a different place, and now as a family we're in a very different place. And I don't say that as any disrespect to the belief system of the Latter-day Saints that I'm still active in and have my own nuanced beliefs in, but it really has been, we're better as a family than we've ever been. Not counting them when they were little kids, but probably from teenagers up. And so I'm just curious if it's only looking at the pain and the angst, which there is that, and there's still some of that, but mostly through that in my case. But the positives, I guess, that I've learned from sitting with people of difference are just so enormous and so much better than when I used to just sit with people who only confirm my belief, So are you good? Did you address that? The benefits that come from being
Jay,
curious to know?
Did you write my concluding chapter, my concluding section? Jana has, I did an interview with Jana. So I've talked to people who are mixed faith, parents and children. I've also talked to professionals that specialize in this area. And this was an area that Jana and I talked about. And I actually opened the chapter recognizing the pain that many feel because of these relationships, but the great opportunity that comes from it. And many people feel like you do, Jay, that going through an intense set of differences, that someone having a different faith where they didn't before, causes us to develop skills and ability and empathy and love that maybe wasn't there before because of sameness. And so many differences have to be navigated, that in that navigation, it actually changes us. And my belief, so for those that are playing along in kind of LDS demographics, we're losing a substantial portion of the North American church. And there's reasons why. And so pretty much all families are going to have diversity of belief. And our rhetoric at church doesn't match that diversity, which means some of the messages that are given there either hurt and cause pain, or the messages that could be offered are not being made that would cause us to come together. So I actually believe that what you found in your marriage and what we all can find in the differences of faith around us, as we bring those principles back to our religious community, our political community, and our families, actually cause us to love each other more and to break down the differences. So nice of you to give me that softball pitch, but it's in the introduction of that chapter because I really believe it. And it's my conclusion about how this has changed me.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. And as I mentioned, Think Again and Faith Again, there's people who attend who aren't part of our church and never have been. And there's some that have no belief in a God or agnostic. And I consider these people dear friends, and I've learned a great deal from them. In fact, the book that I keep harking on, How to Have Difficult Conversations, is by a well-known atheist who has written another book who, I'm trying to remember the title, something how to make more atheists or something like that. But he's an author that you can sense has a great deal of love and compassion for humanity. And unfortunately, the way many of us in religious traditions are raised, we're raised to think of people who don't believe in a God as kind of antithetical to humanitarian and compassion and love virtues, which I've not ever found in my experience to be the case. So I think we live in a particular time that's difficult on a lot of different levels, politically and religiously, but the opportunities are so rich right now because of that difficulty, that we can be moved as individuals and as communities, as families, to have much deeper and richer and more fruitful relationships, I think. And what you're doing, David and Rochelle, is helping us move in that direction. So again, very much appreciate that. And again, all of you who have attended in the past and hopefully will continue to attend in the future, Think Again and Faith Again, deeply grateful that you participate, because it doesn't really work unless there's a group of us to come together and talk about things. So thank you. I did just want to mention, so Anne and Giles Florence, who were here earlier, their son has created a documentary that's beautiful, and it's opening at the Megaplex theaters. It's called Bright Spark. So this Friday, it was in the email, but in case you didn't go, you go back to the email. It's the reconciliation of Trevor Southey, who was a gay Latter-day Saint. I like that word, queer. Married for some years with children, remarkable internationally famous artist. And his journey, along with several other LDS artists that many, particularly in the Wasatch Front in Utah, would be very familiar with. It's a really, really moving and thoughtful documentary. And so anyway, Jenna and I know and some of you may have also been there, but Jenna and I had a chance to see the screening of it, and it was very powerful. So now it's in the theaters, you can go to it, Megaplex, various locations. So I hope you'll avail yourself of that. And then one last pitch for our Great Salt Lake. There's a rally at the Capitol at 12 on Saturday. It's a big deal. So, I mean, you can go to the Trib, you can go to the Deseret News. There's lots of media about this huge concern that lake is at historic lows and what that means for us and what we need to do about it. So it affects the quality of our life and economically and health terms and for the environment, birds, and everything's close to my heart. So anyway, I hope you'll look into that. Anyway, I appreciate so much all of you and all the good that you do in your lives. Thanks for being here, especially to see some of you I haven't seen in a while. John Ogden, nice to see you. It's been a long time. John Ogden presented his book years ago. Very, very thoughtful man about faith and how to view it. Anyway, you're always welcome to email me, call me with ideas and thoughts, just to chat. And thank you very much. Now, if you want to have a little after party, sounds like even though, what time is it where you are, Dave and Rochelle?
It's 11, so we may be fading away here.
You may fade away, so.
Just party on.
Anyway, maybe another 15 minutes if you have anything else you want to share or ask. Thanks for coming.
Should I stop the recording?
Thank you so much.
You can keep it going. It's fine. You're so welcome.
Just make a
I too was glad to see John Ogden. Thanks, John. It's nice. I liked your remarks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for being
Thanks
here.
for the invite, Helen.
What's next on your docket, Jay?
Pardon?
What's next on your docket?
It's Patrick Mason and his co-writer in terms of, what is it, Peace?
Yeah, David Pulsifer.
Oh, Dave, thank you, David Pulsifer. Yeah, so that'll be really, really good. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. It's on the website's homepage the next, I don't know, 5-6 months. So, and open to suggestions from you all. It was fun to talk to Joe this morning, Potter Joe in Spring City. How are you?
It's always good to see my beautiful daughter, Jenny, here.
Where is she?
See her.
Asking good questions to see her.
Hi.
Yeah, where is she? I can see her name.
I know she's there.
Let me turn my video.
There she is.
Hi.
Jenny. Jerry, it was good to have you here. So for those of you who don't know and who are somewhere in a space of Latter-day Saintness, Jerry helps facilitate and monitor a group called Waters of Mormon. Really, really valuable Facebook group for people to be able to ask challenging questions or even share positive experiences they have at church. Sometimes we have the idea that you don't see anything, you don't have sometimes positive things happen, and yet there's leaders and individuals that are doing some really amazing things out there, and so that's another thing that you can hear and share on that platform. You want to say anything about it, Jerry? You need to unmute yourself. Thanks.
Thanks, Jay. It's good to be here. I've been involved with David Ostler in the 3 practice training also. So it's a great learning experience for all of us to jump in and get involved. Nice to be here with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to say before that? Yes, Karen.
Yeah. Well, you know, Jameson are part of that interfaith couples community. I, having been raised in the non-Mormon community and Jameson identifying as Mormon. And I want to know what kind of group can I or we get involved into continue this conversation, because that is just, I mean, our relationship is a representation of healing across that great divide. And I want to explore that further.
Yeah, we should say, Karen, you're still not a member of the LDS Church. Some people might assume that you grew up Catholic and then converted, but no, you're still. And you're not even considered. I don't think you consider yourself Catholic now, either.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's I mean, we would help. I would help support you in starting something like that if you'd like. So I don't know of one offhand.
Oh, really?
But there might be one.
I think it's fascinating to be in a space where I can explore everything I didn't realize I could explore. Didn't have any way to explore for 54 years, because I'm 56 now.
You grew up in Salt Lake, so yeah, area.
Yeah.
As a Catholic. Yeah.
Yeah. And never finding a safe place to have those conversations. But that's what was so extraordinary about this presentation tonight, this not just presentation, this session tonight. So thank you so much for together.
Thank you for being a part of it. Yeah, I think it's valuable. Somebody's phone. Anybody else have anything before we part company? Joe, you're pointing at us. What are you thinking?
I didn't know it was loaded.
You're always loaded. Did you have anything that you wanted to share?
No, I've enjoyed lurking quite a bit.
Okay.
Seeing some friends and meeting new people, and there's Jameis again. Anyway, no, I'm learning about this. I respect David and his brother Richard quite a bit.
Yeah.
Important members of our community.
Yeah, so some of you, well, pretty much everybody here, most of you know probably that David's brother Richard Ostler, for several years now, has been doing a podcast, Listen, Learn, and Love. And it's using a lot of the same, I guess, idea about listening to those in the queer community and him giving them a voice. And sometimes they're family members. Sometimes he ventures a little bit outside that, but it's been pretty much very solidly about the queer community and giving those people an opportunity to share their experience, particularly those that are in the Latter-day Saint faith or were. So, and Richard's just such a very thoughtful, kind way about doing it. So there's not an edge or sharpness to it. So people who might be very solidly and more orthodox in the LDS Church, they could feel safe going to Richard's website or his book. And that's a great resource. Yeah, so both those brothers, interestingly, have really, I think, had a huge impact in the Latter-day Saint community in those areas. So
Richard also has a section of the podcast that is about faith questions. It's a smaller little subset of it, but I did an interview with him once, and I know there are several just with faith questions, but the bulk of it.
Thank you, Jana.
Mm-hmm.
So now, Jana, who haven't you done an interview with yet?
Sure, there are a lot.
You've done one with Gina, right? With A Thoughtful Faith fairly recently.
Yeah, I think I'm in the 5-time club now with A Thoughtful Faith. But yeah, I had one this drop this week,
Yeah, that's what I thought.
this morning, actually, with Gina. Yeah.
And then what other ones? What other venues have you done interviews? Have you been interviewed?
Let's see. So Latter-day Contemplation, Leading Saints,
Leading Saints.
Mormon Stories, several times. Let's see, Latter-day Faith and the Old Mormon Matters, with Dan Witherspoon. I've done Mormon Mental Health. I need to have these all posted somewhere because I can't even remember all of them. I'm going to be, I did a series on Almost Awakened, all about Buddhism for beginners. That was a great conversation with Anthony Miller, Brittany Hartley, and Bill Reel. And I'm going to be doing Mormonism Live with Bill Reel and RFM on Wednesday.
Nice.
So yeah.
You're getting around in all those interesting spaces. It's been interesting to see how many spaces have been created, right? As people have left the church or struggling to stay in the church.
Oh, and at last she said it. I went on at last she said it.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, I loved those girls.
So I'll have those two in the summertime. I've got
Awesome.
them
They're
lined
great.
up, Susan and her compatriot.
Yeah, a great conversation with them. So yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, lots of spaces, lots of them cropping up all the time. It's great.
Yeah. Gloria, did you raise your hand? I can't hear you. Unmute.
I was starting to say goodbye.
Okay.
Old people on the coast go to bed somewhat before midnight, but usually not.
You're an hour earlier. Come on.
I didn't
So good
say
to
we
see
were
you
going
too.
to sleep. Say we were going to bed.
You rascals. Still newlyweds at heart. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. God bless you.
And
Yeah.
Faith Matters. How did I forget Faith Matters? I've been on
Oh, there
Faith
you go,
Matters
Faith
a couple
Matters.
times.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I need to have a list somewhere.
Good to be with you all.
You too.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Jana. Bye-bye.